All right, today we're jumping into a really powerful mental model from former poker champion Annie Duke called Thinking in Bets. It's a whole framework for making smarter decisions when you don't have all the facts. And it all starts with a question you probably wouldn't expect.
So let's just start with a puzzle. What if one of the most famously bad decisions in the history of sports was actually a great decision that just happened to have a terrible, terrible outcome? That single question, it gets right to the very heart of everything we're going to explore today.
And this leads us straight into our first big idea, what's known as the outcome trap. We're going to use one of the biggest moments in sports to break down this tiny but incredibly powerful error in the way we think.
Okay, so picture the scene. Super Bowl XLI. The Seattle Seahawks are on the 1-yard line, literally seconds away from winning the whole thing. The obvious move, right? Hand the ball off to their star running back. But instead, the coach calls a pass play. It gets intercepted, game over, and the entire world just explodes.
The reaction was instant, and it was brutal. Headlines were screaming, dumbest call, terrible mistake, and yeah, the worst play call in NFL history. The logic seemed really simple. A disastrous outcome must mean it came from a disastrous decision. But here's the number that almost no one was talking about at the time. If you look at 15 years of data, a pass from that exact spot on the field gets intercepted only about 2% of the time. It was an extremely unlikely result. So this forces a much better question. Was it a bad decision, or was it just really, really bad luck? This is a perfect example of a cognitive bias called resulting. It's our brain's natural tendency to judge how good a decision was based purely on how it turned out. You know, good result must have been a brilliant decision. Bad result must have been a terrible one. It makes for a nice, clean story. But life is rarely that simple.
So why do we fall into this trap so easily? Well, it's because it's not just some simple mistake we make. It's actually wired into the very way our brains are built to form beliefs in the first place.
We all like to think we're pretty rational, right? That we follow this logical process. We hear some information, we carefully analyze it for the truth, and then we decide if we believe it. Sounds great, but that's not how our minds actually work.
The reality is pretty much the complete opposite. Research shows our brains are wired to believe first and ask questions later, if we ever get around to it. We hear something, and our default setting is just to accept it as true. It turns out that doubt actually takes work.
And this gets even trickier when you throw in another bug in our mental software, the self-serving bias. It's simple. When things go our way, it's because we're smart and skilled. When they go badly, oh, that was just bad luck. It feels good, for sure, but it makes it almost impossible to actually learn from our experiences.
So how in the world do we fight back against these mental shortcuts? Well, Annie Duke proposes a really powerful shift in mindset. We need to start treating life less like a game of chess and a lot more like a game of poker. Think about chess. It's a game of perfect information. Everything's right there on the board. There's almost no luck involved. The better player usually wins. But poker, and let's be honest, most of life, is a game of incomplete information. There are hidden variables and a lot of luck. You can play your hand absolutely perfectly and still lose to a lucky draw. And this gets right to the core of thinking in bets. Our lives are shaped by just two things: the quality of our decisions and luck. The real skill in life is learning how to untangle those two, to figure out how much of the outcome was you and how much was just the cards you were dealt. Okay, so the theory is great, but how do we actually use this stuff? Let's dive into some practical, everyday tools for what Duke calls truth-seeking.
Here is a super simple but incredibly powerful habit. Before you state something as a fact, just pause and ask yourself, wanna bet? That simple question forces you to stop thinking in terms of 100% certainty and start thinking in percentages. Am I 90% sure about this, or is it more like 60%? It instantly exposes how certain or uncertain you really are. You know, we're pretty terrible at spotting our own biases, but we are fantastic at spotting them in other people. That's the absolute genius behind creating a truth-seeking pod. Just think of it like a trusted peer review group for your big decisions. A few people who can help you see your own blind spots without just telling you what you want to hear. Now, for a pod like this to actually work, the group has to agree on a few key rules. First, the goal is accuracy, not just agreeing with each other. Second, everyone has to be accountable for their reasoning, not just their conclusions. And third, you have to be actively open to different viewpoints that challenge your own assumptions. All right, our final set of tools involves a kind of mental time travel. It's all designed to help us make decisions today that our future selves are going to thank us for. A seriously powerful technique for this is called the pre-mortem. It works like this. Before you start a big project, you get the team together and you imagine it's 6 months in the future, and the project has been a complete and total disaster. Then you work backward as a group to figure out all the things that could have gone wrong. This simple shift in perspective frees people up to spot risks without feeling like they're being negative. So the process starts with that imagined failure. From there, you can easily trace back the potential causes. Maybe a key supplier went bust or the marketing message just didn't connect. Then you come back to the present and you can build a solid plan to prevent those specific problems from ever happening. It's proactive problem solving at its absolute best. Backcasting is basically the optimistic twin of a premortem. With this one, you imagine a massive success, and you work backward from there to map out the critical path. What were the key steps and milestones that made it all happen? This really helps you identify the most important things you need to do to reach your goal. And this all leads to one master skill: learning to separate the quality of your decisions from the quality of their outcomes. Because when you can do that, everything becomes a learning opportunity. A lucky win might actually reveal a flaw in your strategy, and a loss might just confirm that you made the best possible decision with the information you had. That is the real key to long-term growth. So we'll leave you with this final thought. A lot of us are out here trying to play chess in a world that's actually a game of poker. The next time you're facing a tough choice, ask yourself, are you focused on making the best bet you can, or are you just crossing your fingers and hoping for a lucky outcome? Are you sure you're playing the right game?